Spent a long time talking about the old system, the new system, and we're talking about the third site in Poland, which is one that I very strongly supported during that time. So do you agree that initially we were talking about having that capability of knocking down an ICBM from Iran in the third site originally by 2013? That slipped probably to about 2015. Am I generally right there?
Sir, originally it was, and
actually originally I think in 2012, but then it started slipping. And
yes, sir. And then the requirements for ratification of the treaties before we could begin work to build a missile field is 5.5 years, another 1.5 years to integrate it and complete the operational certification by the combatant command in Europe. So it was 2017 we reached the point before we could have the first operational site.
Okay, now I disagree with that, and there is, I will submit for the record, evidence that would have been 2015. It's not that big a deal, but that's an opinion that I'm expressing. The second thing I want to get out is on this treaty, how it does affect our ability to protect America, our national missile defense system. Dr. Miller, I looked in your written testimony after you made a statement, and I couldn't find it, but you said something to the effect that the restriction by Russia, there is no restriction by Russia in terms of our ability for a national missile defense system. And I did find, however, in General Riley's statement, it says the New START treaty has no constraints on current and future components of the BMD's development or deployment. Let me just suggest to you that there are a lot of people who disagree with that. And I mean, how do you respond very, very briefly, and just take one of you, perhaps General Riley, you'd be the right one. When you have the Russian defense minister, Sergei Lavrov, who stated that linkage to missile defense is clearly spelled out in the accord and legally binding, and the Russians will have the right to exit the accord if the U.S. building up a missile defense strategy. I also have actually from the statement that was given, the unilateral statement by Russia, where they say the same thing, that yes, we do have that restriction in the United States, and it is legally binding. Any response to that?
Sir, the Department of Defense General Counsel and the State Department and the National Security Council General Counsel have all advised me that it is not legally binding.
So that's us. We're saying it's not legally binding, although the Russians say it is legally binding. Does that bother you?
No, sir.
It bothers me.
Sir, if I could add briefly, it's clear that the Russian unilateral statement is not unilaterally binding, but it's also clear that they have the right to withdraw from the treaty once ratified and implemented, should they see it in their national security interests. We don't expect that to be the case, and I would also note that the Russians have made a similar statement with respect to the START treaty and concerns about
yes, I know that.
ABM development. The U.S. then withdrew from the ABM treaty. The Russians stayed in the START treaty at that time. We can expect them to make decisions that are based on their national interests.
The third thing that I want to get into the record, and there's not going to be a lot of time to do all this, would be the issue that comes out as to when Iran is going to have the capability. What has bothered me, and we spent a long time looking at this, we know that we have ground-based interceptors in California, we know we have them in Alaska, and we've seen the map showing the footprint that, yes, it does reach the east coast of the United States, barely, and a lot of people have said, well, that's assuming we're lucky with one shot, and then there's a percentage that's attached to that. So I think the previous administration, in talking about the third site, felt the same as I do. That is not a comfort level that I feel that I'm enjoying. Now, when do you think, would anyone like to volunteer as to when you think that the Iranians are going to have the capability of sending an ICBM to continental United States?
Sir, that's an inherently uncertain question. The current estimates, as included in a recent unclassified report submitted by DOD, say that it could potentially be as soon as 2015.
Okay, and I agree with that. That's the first thing we agree on. That being 2015 and the capabilities, I look at this, and we've been talking about the old system and the new system. I'm familiar with the SM-3 Block 1A, what its capabilities are. That's 2010, that's now. The Block 1B, 2015, Block 2 Alpha, that would be 2018, but really to have the capability of a ground-based system that would have been, in this case, in Poland. At one time, we were talking about doing that in Florida and decided that we wanted to have something that would also be defensive for Western Europe, and I agreed with that at the time. But to get to that, you've got to have an SM-3 Block 2B, Bravo. Does anyone want to venture a guess as to when that Bravo would be effective?
Sir,
deployable?
Sir, we estimate that for 2020. If I could briefly add, the current deployment, or the current planned deployment for the phased adaptive approach includes the placement of a forward-based radar in Europe in the 2011 timeframe. That radar will not only help the defense of Europe, it will also help the defense of the United States, and was indeed the most important contribution of the previous architecture. That's a common element from the past architecture. We moved it forward from what we estimated to be 2017 deployment to a 2011 deployment to provide that capability for improved national missile defenses earlier.
Well, it's my understanding that this 2020 date on the Phase 4 is one. Do you all stand behind that date? Because I don't. I've read a lot of things to the contrary, that it's not, there's not any level of certainty to that. Does anyone feel very confident?
Yes, sir. I've developed 4 missile systems. This is very feasible. We used very conservative timelines. We've looked at the technology. I've had 2 independent estimates. I've asked the Defense Science Board, and the Secretary of Defense has supported me in an independent assessment of that this year to verify.
Okay, I want you to send me something that is convincing that we would have that by 2020. Now, even if that's true, and I would question that, I do want to see what you have, and I want to give you the benefit of that doubt, General. But even if that's true, we'd still have that time frame between 2015 and 2020 that is very disturbing to me. This whole idea on the estimates that we've had in the past is a great deal of concern. And you've heard me say this before, because I was there in 1998, in August of 98, when we asked the question, when will North Korea have the multiple stage capability? At that time, the intelligent estimate, and it came out of the White House also, somewhere between 5 and 10 years. That was the 24th of August of 1998. 7 days later, the 31st of August, they fired one. So I'm not, I'd rather err on the side that I'd rather be conservative in our estimates. And all these things, when I look at them, I have to at least express the opinion of one member of this panel who's very much disturbed over what could happen to the United States with this change in policy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Inhofe. Senator Lieberman.